A very good afternoon and welcome to the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. I'm your host. Today, we're discussing the deepening controversy surrounding the regional sittings, which have already started taking place. As you're all aware, on Wednesday, Parliament began its regional sittings, with Gulu City hosting the plenary for the Northern region. That's taking place at Kaunda Grounds. The House is sitting for 3 days, that is the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th of August. The leader of opposition in Parliament, Joel Senyonyi, has maintained his stance that these sittings are wasteful, with each estimated to cost about 5 billion shillings. But some MPs put the figures at a slightly lower figure of about 2.3 billion shillings per sitting, which still translates to about 9.2 billion for all the 4 regions where Parliament will sit. And 9.2 billion is still a huge amount of taxpayers' money. Again, a good number of opposition MPs did not show up for the first sitting, and some are still missing in the second day. The cost of the parliamentary sittings aside, the government says it has no money to pay medical interns. And a few days ago, the president came up with a rather unpopular suggestion that whoever sponsors a medical student for their studies should also carry on with this responsibility until the student concludes their medical internship. This remains a contentious issue. But now this sitting of Parliament outside its chambers is also not a new thing. It has been done before, that's in 2008, under the former Speaker, Rebecca Kadaga, and her then Deputy, Edward Sekandi, to interact with rural communities in Masaka. Now, today, we are looking further into these issues and we're asking a number of questions. But before we go into the questions, let me take this opportunity to extend a warm welcome to my wonderful panelists, Mr. Joseph Othieno, political commentator and UPC Ideologue. Joseph, good afternoon and welcome to the show.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be here and to be seated next to you. Usually I am flanked next to Sarah Birete, whom I now miss very much, particularly because I know that there's somebody here who pretends to be missing her just because of academic association. But I must say Sarah is my baddie. But that said, yes, it's a delight to be here. But that said also too, is that I'm rather concerned that we are discussing a matter of monies, knowing very well that this morning before I came to the studios and yesterday, Thursday in the afternoon, one of the texts that I got was from a young teacher who is struggling to feed her child and her sister's child who's a dependent on her. This teacher is 20-something-year-old from the north, but almost nearly stranded in Kampala.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. That's quite sobering. Also, retired Major Awich Pollar, the Director External Relations for the NRM. Major, you're most welcome. Always good to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, and greetings to the viewers. Of course, my brother from the Congress is saying, it's alluding to somebody missing Sarah. It's me missing her. Because Sarah is from Weranyanye, I'm from Ntare. So we have an undying relationship of Werantare. I hope she's having a good time in Washington. And she'll soon join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Major. Well, as he's just said, Dr. Sarah Birete is engaged elsewhere. She's in Washington, D.C. for official duties. But also our other panelist, Dr. Robert Ojambo, sends his apologies. He will be with us next week. But now back to the regional sittings. Also, a few hours ago, we saw in the news that President Museveni arrived in Gulu. But still, for many Ugandans, there is just no justification whatsoever that these sittings are actually moving Parliament closer to the people, even if the Speaker of Parliament, Anita Among, insists that it is. In the Speaker's words, if I'm to quote, she said, a people-centered Parliament must be responsive to the needs of the citizens. But what people are asking is, what is Parliament doing in these regional sittings that it cannot do when it sits in Kampala? But also, does it mean that Parliament can be responsive to the needs of a particular group of people only when it sits in that particular place? Gentlemen, let's start from there. Your views, your thoughts about the sittings and the conversations that are taking place. I watched a little bit of the proceedings yesterday, but I don't know what your take is. Who should I start with? Should I start with you, Major, or Congress?
Start with the Congress.
Yes, the honor is yours.
You know, this NRA guys, when things get difficult, they decide to blame everybody but themselves. Now it is this very difficult question, and my friend and brother has suggested that I lead on it. No, it's extremely unfortunate, actually, that we can see 20 billion Uganda shillings just in our face, directly being poured down the rivers, and in this case, the first 5 billion being rolled off at Karuma Bridge. Which Karuma Bridge, I don't know. If some of the people travel there in a parliamentary bus, then technically they should not have been passing there, because the bridge is right now, and a major engineering and technical observation, thanks to the incompetence of this administration. But of course, thanks to the fact that they will argue that they don't have sufficient resources. The resource envelope of a nation will always be limited, generally. So to seek to waste money, basically by creating possibilities and opportunities for some legislators who should have been spending weekends in Gulu on their own accounts, or visiting friends and visiting cousins, and some of those other legislators who, before they became members of parliament, ought to have gained sufficient interest to visit particularly the north and the east, particularly the north, in fact, which has been a center in which NRA and others fought a vicious war, and that therefore it means that some of these people would have been going to familiarize with themselves before going to parliament anyway. Now, instead of mobilizing those monies and injecting those resources in a very urgent need for the people, particularly for Lango, Acholi, Karamoja, and indeed parts of West Nile, including my own Bukit, but particularly the north, the northern regions, particularly directly affected by war. Those people need scholastic materials. Those people need quality teaching. And the teachers there need to be paid, and well paid. The teachers there need teachers' accommodation. Those people need medical facilities. They need the health facilities that exist there, the dispensaries, and the few hospitals that UPC built and NRA found and have not added, and that they are equipped, that they are supported and supported with medical services, and that the doctors and nurses are well paid, and that they've got doctors and nurses accommodation, and that in this case that they're sufficiently motivated in order to be able to respond to the major and urgent health needs of the peoples there. Last week I visited Toro Hospital, informally, and the only X-ray machine that exists there has been there for nearly 10 years, and apparently there was merely a part that was missing out of it. I was not able to get the specific figures, but some of my friends, including my good friend Asaro Pendi, who's the district member of parliament for the area, who knows, and she was associated with this machine. And of course, the representative for Toro municipality, Yere or Fono, they may be in Gulu today. They need to be able to tell us how much that money is required in order to get an X-ray machine for a Tororo regional hospital to actually function. An X-ray machine in order to function. These monies should be going for services like that, rather than a regional seating. The strange thing that indeed, as you suggest at the beginning, that members of parliament ought to be able to go and sit in a formal sitting anyway in the first instance in order for them to listen. I have no clue. The first parliament at independence was a small parliament of just about 80 members. They delivered revolutionary for this country economically, socially, and otherwise. And that parliament was a parliament of a small population. And so therefore it meant that a legislator, for example, like Vice President and Minister for Agriculture, John Babiha, was able to provide, as part of a government policy and program, for a comprehensive agricultural and animal husbandry programs that including cattle dips, including Karamoja. They did not need to go and sit in Moroto fast in order to be able to provide those. So many of these other things in common sense. My view is that This is a diversion by NRA to take away public opinion from the corruption at State House, from the corruption at Parliament, from the corruption and public image that has been presented by members of Parliament, and from failure for these guys to account, and for the corruption that involves Lubol Hospital that never rises, and for the fact that Mr. Museveni gives a dubious investor several billion Uganda shillings in the name of Atiak Sugar, and cannot sustain, or indeed cannot give, is it 18 billion Uganda shillings to young Ugandans who are actually trainee doctors who are madly and massively in need in this country. But in any case, maybe some of these legislators who are possibly amongst the most privileged on the continent, to give them a free ride, a weekend trip, a midweek trip, a retreat, in a beautiful and welcoming northern Uganda, although battered by war, which was being pushed by NRA. Visit Uganda, enjoy themselves in the Kaunda grounds in Gulu. I think it is almost a provocative drive by the Kampala elite, against the suffering majority of Ugandans. That maybe, if these guys continue with this kind of impunity, maybe I might join the war of the other side, meaning the ordinary Ugandan citizen, particularly those on the needy side, versus the established Kampala elite. So may it be this country needs a revolution against the Kampala elite who was actually using their several $billion and several billion shillings. I want to repeat as I conclude this, that extraordinarily, Mr. Museveni gives Roko, a private company, 500 billion Uganda shillings. A private company, a dubious foreign private company, not Mukalazi Technical Services, which the voters were trying to enhance as building technical capacity for which would not necessarily need Chinese construction firms in Kampala, but a local firm. But a local construction giving them 500 million Uganda shillings and pulling away that money from key essential services like education and health. That does not require sitting in Gulu. And in fact, if you want to do those sittings in Tororo, please do not come to Tororo. All we need are those essential machines, and all we need basically an Agongara Road. All we need is actually the road going to Molo. All we need are the roads to Mulanda. And by the all we need is to make sure that what the doctors tell me in Tororo, that the whole sub-region, I think, district has only about 4 anesthetics. In other words, doctors carry out operations without anesthetics. In other words, specialist people. So you can see how massively painful operations are under this regime. And these guys are enjoying air-conditioned 4.5-star hotels in Gulu. Shame on these guys.
Thank you. Major, let's hear from you. What is Parliament doing in the regional sittings that it cannot effectively do here in Kampala?
Well, this question of regional sitting is a question that calls on my opinion. Why I'm saying this, because NRM as a party where I work has no position on that. Basically because there are 3 arms of government. There's the legislature. Okay, you could start with the executive, headed by the president, the legislature, headed by the speaker, and the judiciary, headed by the chief justice. Ideally, these 3 arms are supposed to work independently and checking on each other. Now, a particular exercise like regional parliament, it can be deemed that is a prerogative of parliament. And that is why when the congressman imports government, I find it a bit shaky. And I've said here that what if in future the executive comes and says, no, we are not privy to the idea. Therefore, this point calls on my opinion, knowing that 1, the party has no position on it, and 2, that the legislature stands alone. Now, having said that, to look into this exercise, one actually need to break down these figures. If they're saying 5 billion, what is it doing? Because it is on the breaking down of the figures that we can either lay our fears that it is not meant for corrupt tendencies or otherwise. For example, if a member of parliament sits in Kampala, is the presumption that is coming from his home in Nigeria and therefore doesn't need per diem, or it doesn't matter? If it does it mean therefore that they have gone to Gulu away from their homes and therefore entitled to per diem? In which case, one would even argue that you see a time when you see MPs are poor, then you create an activity, to get money, and that would be unfortunate. There was a joke where a headmaster in a school said he can't be poor. The people asked him how. He said, no, when I'm here, I create activities. For example, this window you see here, tomorrow we'll close it and return the window the other side and bring this door here. And in the process, I create activity and expenditures. Then after 6 months or 1 year, I'll bring back the very door here and the window, I take it back. So there are tendencies of people creating activities for funding. Therefore, there's a need to break down this money. How about the service providers? Those who are going to, how sure are we not that a coster for members of parliament that would ordinarily take liters of 500,000 will be fuel at $1 million, the same coster. And back and forth then would be 2 million. So for parliament to come out clean in this thing, they need to break down this money so that they show to us that no individual benefits has occurred. That is when we shall know that they have not gone there for a financial benefit. The other thing is that what are they going to discuss that is regional oriented for anybody to feel? I've looked at this, therefore would mean we see the entire order paper. The order paper is the agenda items. So we need to look at the order paper for this sitting in Gulu. Are they only going to discuss northern Uganda or related? I've seen one agenda item, a resolution to appreciate the president for bringing peace in Karamoja, Lango, Acholi, and West Nile, which is a pretty good resolution if passed, and it is good. I see the relationship with the North, but is that the only item? More so, somebody would of course argue that a similar resolution could be passed. In fact, it was passed in Uganda at one time, in Kampala. You remember a time when some people passed a resolution against Museveni, and then another resolution was passed in favor, and that was done in Kampala. So somebody would say, wouldn't you pass that same resolution here? But this is being done. So all the same, what I'm saying is, it would be good for us to look at the order paper. They should show us order paper. Maybe it is public document, could be on Google. Somebody would Google and check. Is the order paper Northern Uganda customized? Is it designed that way? This will help us to look into it. But I've seen one which, in my opinion, I don't know what the Congress says. Congress, I am happy such a resolution is passed to praise the president or to thank the president for the peace ushered brought in the region that is mentioned. I'm happy about it. If it is passed in Gulu where the people are seeing, it's okay. Now, out of this, therefore, the last aspect of this is, can we evaluate after this? Since we are targeting all the regions, can we now, therefore, since this one we have let it to pass, what kind of evaluation will be used? What indicators will be set to say, yes, this was worth the exercise. Yes, we have achieved it. So an independent evaluation system should be set after this first exercise to say we are not going to waste more money in Umbale, or we are not going to waste more money in Fort Fortal, or we are not going to waste more money in Umbarara. We have tested it, we have seen it. Colleagues, honorable members, this can be done in Kampala. If the effect with an independent analysis is done and it is found useful, maybe we would set a precedent, because in any case, a precedent has to be set. So these are my thoughts on this regional sitting as far in Gulu.
Okay, thank you very much, Major. Joseph, you talked about, of course, limited resources and prioritization. And the speaker insists that, well, this activity was budgeted for, and so the money is there. We knew we were going to spend it for such and such a purpose. But then the issue of prioritization comes in. And we know Parliament has powers to appropriate. It does it all the time. It can approve or reject a request for a supplementary budget, for example. It can decide where to move money during the budget process. But if this Parliament is as responsive as the Speaker wants us to believe, then wouldn't they have still appropriated this money, moved it to an area that could actually solve an immediate problem? Whether it's the issue of medical interns or any other area considered a priority, don't they have powers to do that? They do, certainly.
Of course they do.
So
I was burning to answer that, but maybe you answer it.
could.
Okay, let me talk about this issue of saying it was budgeted for. I think that is conceptually not correct. You see, look at the precedent on the money given to commissioners. The money given to commissioners, their word, the court ruled that the procedures of dispensing it was okay, but they putting it in the budget was wrong. So nobody should come and say, by me having money in the budget,
it was okay.
It okays it. No. In the case of the commissioners, the court even instructed the PS, the secretary to the treasury, to reprimand and punish the clerk to parliament because he's the technical person who ensured money is there. Therefore, this saying that because mere money is in the budget, then it is okay. No, the mischief starts from the budgeting. And the court made a pronouncement on this. The court said, fine, if we are to look at procedures of giving it, you gave it in the process. However, how did it get in the budget in the first place? So therefore, this should, and I had argued about that with my colleagues before the court pronouncement. I told my friends that the mischief lies in the budgeting. Why did you put it in the first place? And that is why in the money with the commissioners, the court ruled that dispensing the money was okay, but the giving. And this now takes me back to my party chairman, President Museveni. He has always had issues with the accounting officers because the mischief starts with the accounting officers, the PS.
But why does he keep them there? Well, I know recently
the struggle continues.
A few moves here and there, but why?
The struggle continues.
If you know your accounting officers are incompetent, are failing the system, why do you still keep them there?
Yes, the struggle continues. But I want to make it clear that the defense of the monies in the budget does not hold. The defense that mere money being in the budget, that defense was torn down or was teared by the court. The court said they're having it itself. The wrong planting of money in the budget is a mischief itself. So you can't now say, okay, for us we are parliament, we are going to Gulu because it was already in the budget. Was it put there by God? The mischief starts from there, and the court made a pronouncement.
This is a diversion by NRA to take away public opinion from the corruption at State House, from the corruption at Parliament, from the corruption and public image that has been presented by members of Parliament, and from failure for these guys to account, and for the corruption that involves Lubol Hospital that never rises, and for the fact that Mr. Museveni gives a dubious investor several billion Uganda shillings in the name of Atiak Sugar, and cannot sustain, or indeed cannot give, 18 billion Uganda shillings to young Ugandans who are actually trainee doctors who are madly and massively in need in this country, of legislators and how this impacts on basically service deliveries. Where we're able to have not only an excessively big parliament, but a parliament perhaps whose capacities in certain instances are brought to question, must concern us in terms of what we're discussing today. I always put continuous disclaimers. There are fantastic people in the Legislative Assembly whom I've not met and whom I don't know. But I also have several friends who are actually very decent people. But no, many of the decisions that come off the Parliament are actually extraordinarily worrying. It is almost seemingly beginning to look like it's a Chikubo place for survival. It's a Chikubo place for making money. It is actually a school for scandal, but political scandal which is formulated in the legislative system and unfortunately becomes the third arm of government, which ideally independent or otherwise, they seem to be extremely powerful. So powerful that they can arrogantly, amidst all the huge amount of money and privileges that they have, that they're able to go ahead and expand and create these spaces for them, as I said, to give themselves opportunities for a whole week trip to Gulu at our expenses. And it's actually quite insulting considering the fact, as I said, that while we're talking 5 billion, we are actually crying for the monies merely for interns taken by Comrade Awich's chairman. That said, actually, I link this to the chairman, your chairman, Comrade Awich, and Mr. Museveni will going to be very happy this Friday that I've called him chairman for the first time in my life, even if chairman for NRA. Regardless of the fact that these arms of government are independent, the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. The reason why I will again round back onto your chief is this: one, he's the executive. We know Mr. Museveni, and we've known him for over 40 years, that when he doesn't like it, he'll say it. In this case, not only has he not said no, and we know if he objected to it, it will not happen, but he has actually gone ahead and gone to endorse it by going to Gulu. By the way, Mr. Museveni's convoy. Mr. Museveni's convoy alone, the cost of travel for Mr. Museveni's convoy from Kawempe to Gulu is a huge amount of money. It could transform the lives of an entire village in Kalisizo. So lest we forget. So really that's what it is. But in any case, anyway, no, I think the problem here, Judith, is impunity. We've got a parliament that knows that they'll do whatever they want, except when they're taunting the interest of Mr. Museveni. We've got an executive that knows that it has no bounds. And we've got a judiciary that in any case, anyway, in as long as they follow the lines thinly and appropriately, they will be okay. But in any case, anyway, what is on focus here is basically the executive and the legislature. But I must take issues with Comrade Awich, is a privilege of honoring Mr. Museveni as the peace bringer and peacemaker of northern Uganda. I reject that. Museveni is the net producer of conflict in northern Uganda. Museveni has gone to northern Uganda basically to pacify something that he started. Granted, we helped him. We, the citizens of this country, and we, the leaders of Uganda People's Congress from across the country, and to an extent, we leaders, including some of the leaders from northern Uganda, who worked heavily to bring peace and stability in northern Uganda. It is not a Museveni thing. And I actually feel insulted that Mr. Museveni is going to be endorsed. And some of us don't see our names even as footnotes. But it's not being jealous. The truth is that Mr. Museveni did not bring peace to northern Uganda. The war, particularly naturally where Mr. Museveni is a war that was started by NRA, Mr. Museveni's own army, in May 1986. The war started in May 1986 as a result, Judith, of NRA after reaching Gulu in March 1986. Yeah? For over a 2-month period, they focused on former servicemen, meaning former soldiers, police and prisons officers and intelligence people in services, to lay down their arms and return their arms. And once this had happened, they emerged from May the disappearances of some of these former servicemen and women, predominantly servicemen, and the beginning of a disappearance of young men of fighting age. Read Dr. Milton Obote's Notes on Concealment of Genocide in Uganda. That's an authoritative piece. In that, you'll see the account of where ordinary Acholi people were beginning to get concerned, remembering the traumas and massacres and targeted massacres by particular Lango and Acholi citizens, And people were simply saying that, no, we just survived this hardly 10 years ago from Idi Amin. Now this guy has come and it has started with us. People mobilize and organize themselves in self-defense. The war by the people of Acholi against NRA was a self-defense thing. NRA started it, and that was the official. And a further disclaimer, which is very important. Following the NRA and UNLA capture of the government, elected government of UPC in 1985, the mess over that 6 months, the confusion in Kampala, the eventual overpowering of their friends by Museveni. When Museveni came to power, his trip via the east to the north and an arrival in Gulu. Mr. Museveni did not arrive in Gulu and was received with olive branches. No. But Mr. Museveni was not received in Acholi, possibly in Lango. Museveni was not received anywhere from outside Kampala, with hostilities. Not because he is the alpha and omega, as he might want to present himself. The people of this country genuinely post the Okellos and what had happened. Museveni had an opportunity to make peace with the Republic of Uganda and all the citizens of Uganda from the north and east. And Museveni, in Acholi, deliberately started the war, meaning his NRA started the war. That is how the war in northern Uganda started. As I said, read notes on concealment of genocide in Uganda. So the war in the north was started by NRA, and it was not ended by NRA. It was ended through our efforts, Uganda People's Congress, Milton Obote, people like ourselves, persuading international community, persuading fighting forces, and trying to put pressure on Mr. Museveni to talk the talks that eventually led to the silencing of guns in northern Uganda.
Mm-hmm. Major, would you like to respond to this contradiction of your viewpoint that Museveni is in Gulu because he pacified the region and therefore he deserves the recognition for it? And we're having this viewpoint that says, look, he actually created the mess that actually engulfed the north.
Now, first of all, our main topic is the regional parliament. Yeah. And therefore, even when matters come, it should come directly with the regional parliament. I mentioned Museveni, that aspect, because it is on the agenda paper. Mm. I've seen a copy of the resolution being circulated. So I don't want to dwell in depth, but I will answer this. But I want to visit a bit on this defense of the budget. That's if something is in the budget, then it is okay. Yeah. That defense court rubbished it, and it shouldn't. Because assuming, for example, by default, the budget was saying each MP will bag 500 million shillings.
Would that be
Should
okay?
Therefore Ugandans keep quiet? Because it is in the budget.
That's correct.
It is in the budget. It is in the budget.
Yeah.
Oh, put it this way. Suppose the money was so little in the budget that every MP was expected to eat some few grams of beans per day and posho. Would we also keep quiet? Because that is what the budget said. That is what the budget said. So, if they can question if the budget was inadequate, we can as well question if the budget is too much. Or therefore, meaning that the idea of a budget is not an idea that you can't touch. Court said in the case of commissioners that the gist of the budget itself the source of mischief and somebody should be held. So the defense of money in the budget should be dismissed. Now, I come back to my colleague. I raised it in view of the fact that I was saying one way of seeing the relevance of a regional parliament is by looking at the order paper.
Now, go to your point, comrade.
Is the order paper customized to the region? I said one of the things I've seen in the order paper which is customized is a resolution to appreciate Museveni. And I said it is good, and I still say it is good. Now, about the war in the north, how it started. My congressman, we could organize another debate.
I'm looking
Because
forward.
all that you have are false. I was in 9th Battalion as a soldier, young as I was. So I participated in it. I was in the first NRA which moved to the east, which passed, it entered Agago district from a place called Odormit. It went to Patton, now in Acholi. It went to Adilang, it went to Labuoduong, which was a big recruitment area. I was the first NRA to step my feet there. And then we went to Calon, where we found Major Bonyo had just been with a helicopter a day before.
How old were you at
Yes.
that time?
That is a debate now, but I was young. That's why I'm saying we need to organize this other debate. Therefore, the procedures of how NRA was treating former soldiers, I saw with my own eyes. You can't imagine NRA was like a group of nuns, but who could win battles. It was totally opposite what people had thought Museveni was. It was like a group of nuns, and yet they were fighters. Now, the former soldiers would bring their guns, leave it, and you'd be asked, do you want to stay or do you want to go? If he chooses, me, I'm tired, the man would walk when you're saying. When he says I would stay, he would stay. There was a process which had been initiated that, look, Amin soldiers were sent to Luzira, to Kirinya in Jinja, and Tanzania as war prisoners. Museveni insisted, the philosophy then which was being propounded by political commissars was, soldiers are not wrong, it is the leaders. Therefore, soldiers should be taken for a political education. All of them were taken to Kiburara. And it was a crime to have a former soldier in your unit because they were supposed to be taken for reorganization, a political education. Therefore, the citation you are citing from President Obote, he wasn't here. He also had rumors. You were possibly in London. You had rumors. Some of us
No,
were
I
in the
was
theater.
no, I wasn't in London. No, I wasn't in London.
Some of us were in the
Comrade
theater.
Comrade Awich, I was not in London.
So you were in Makere?
No. By 1986, I was in Makere, and I was also a relatively young person. And by the way, I saw the arrival of these NRA boys. Some of them very little kids.
Can
here
I
in
finish
Makere. No. I'll come back to you. Sorry for interjecting.
What are you answering?
So I saw with my own eyes the fact that Awich was in the bush and he saw his version of NRA, including wherever they went to the north, is neither here nor there. I also have seen with my own eyes, and I'm a direct victim of NRA. So this thing of you see, you saw, it doesn't apply. Let's proceed.
For example, I want to illustrate this. There was a gentleman called Ongom Phillips. He was a lieutenant. He had been a quartermaster in Umbale. But then, during the war, he was part of the leaders in the Eastern Front with those of Ujuku. This guy resisted. We fought them up to Patton. This same guy joined NRA. He died recently, a full colonel. He was the one commanding that troops. And immediately after that fighting, Ongom came, he died recently, a colonel. His wife is now the vice chair of NRM women for northern Uganda. So I saw this thing with my eyes, these falsifications, these narrations, whatever it is, I remember the first attack was 41st Battalion of Suicide in Pajimo. There was also one which I had not known but 28th in Bibia. But these are just, anyway, that is for another day.
How do we reconcile this different historical perspective?
Let me have a little bit. My context was this, which may be right, and it's probably right, that when NRA came, and I told you, that when NRA came, they were not resisted. Didn't I say that? They were not resisted. They were not welcomed with olive branches like these funny gods from Luweero bushes who were just busy eating bread rather than breaking people's necks in Luweero. No. But they were not resisted. All I'm saying was that after the pacifications, including what Awich may have seen, in May 1986, people, soldiers, ex-soldiers, and young people started disappearing. Whatever was happening, I don't know. Actually, people mobilize themselves in self-defense. That's all I was trying to say. So I would say that, well, once these guys arrived in Gulu, they started targeting or breaking people's necks or vice versa. Okay. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the context.
Okay, we're talking about the regional sittings and the MPs and the money question.
Yeah, and the MPs sitting there, will be erroneous. And because I was a witness, I was there, I'll reject the idea that Museveni brought peace in Northern Uganda, because he did not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is the question. This is the issue that I want to raise, and I like how Major actually brings out the question of interest and the motives for certain activities, which anyone can clearly see it's money. Many times we've actually heard MPs come out openly and say, look, we are under huge financial constraints. We have loan sharks on our cases. They are heavily indebted. That's a fact. And I'm sure even when you sit in the ruling party and you meet these MPs, you hear a lot of these discussions with them. And that brings me to one question. When you have a house of 500 plus people who are really running around scampering looking for money to survive on, that paints a certain impression for the country, and it comes with huge costs for us, especially in terms of legislation. What is the impact of having a highly financially stressed, and financial stress comes with a lot of the emotional stress is also there, and the mental stress is equally there. When you have all these kinds of stresses on 500 and something people who are supposed to actually come up with sober legislation, which is to lead the country, what impact does this have on policy and where we're going? Would you like to take that?
Yeah, it's a Comrade which partly talked about this thing at the beginning.
Yeah.
Some of this is an element of egg plus chicken thing. The numbers of parliament is an issue. The quality of legislators is an issue. The intent and the current culture of corruption, headed by starting with State House, is an issue. The answer may be what the question may be. For me, I generally believe that this situation will not change. It's interesting the way you now present MPs as needy men and women.
Because
but that's true.
And that comes out in our conversations many times when you get them one-on-one. They show that vulnerable side of
Indeed. And when I said so, I was actually emphasizing your point, because they do, because I also meet these guys. The answer really, really lies in a redirection, rekindle, of the political process. Unless and until there is a new direction in terms of leadership. Whether Mr. Museveni is able to do it at this stage, I don't know. Because it still can be, as an elder, and simply say that, wake up, guys. I don't know what my legacy is going to be like. Bang the table since we've had enough. And enough is enough, and from today on, we have to begin doing things differently. What is it? Even without a reform in terms of size of the Legislative Assembly and many of these other very big government institutions, all we simply need to do is to begin to inject resources where they're due. The reason why people are chasing these guys for monies during funerals is because there are no health services, there are no educational services. People's agricultural sectors have been broken. There's no guarantee that young graduates who finish universities and studied accounting are going to get jobs in accounting. There's no guarantee that the guys who studied social work and social admin will get jobs in appropriate sectors. And what's the alternative? The alternative is that people have to fudge and fudge and fudge. And the new narrative of the last, particularly 30 years, is that politics now is a place for making money by many of these legislators who sell their houses. I think I was in a different conversation yesterday. Sell their houses to desperately go into parliament. And for the next 5 years, they want to make sure that within the first 5 years, they've got back their money. And the remaining other 3 or 4 years, they're making profit. So that really is the only way. Create possibilities, make sure that basically we inject, have a public sector reform. And then from there, provide leadership from the top in which our key leaders are exemplary, and other thing from there. legislators will begin to legislate without unnecessary demand from unnecessary and undue demands from the constituents.
Major, could we hear from you?
Yes, I am thinking that your question is the big number, the running around for resources, the stress, and the impact on legislation.
Yes.
Now, ideally, the big number would be a hiding ground for many people, saying that, after all, we are so many, who will see me not having talked? Will they pick on me? But unfortunately, this one can't now be a hiding ground. Why? Because even the attendance is so low that you actually hardly believe we have a big number of parliamentarians. You can't imagine with such a big number, you have the contradiction of not raising quorum. How can a parliament be so big and yet there's no quorum? We should be having excess quorum every time, but it is the opposite. So the idea of saying we are so many will hide doesn't even hold, because they are never there. So the few who are there will be touched anyway. But I like to zero on the effect on the legislation, especially running around for looking for ends to meet vis-a-vis your concentration. You see, ideally, in many jurisdictions, a member of parliament is supposed to have a research officer, and they do, they are provided.
Yeah.
So the research officer is supposed to do a detailed research on a particular topic and hand over to the honorable member to read through. And then also, this honorable member is supposed to have read the text of a draft, whether text of a resolution or a text of a piece of law, a bill, to the extent that he's supposed to do due diligence to even see where there's supposed to be a comma or a full stop or otherwise. But because of the nature of the running of our honorable colleagues, nobody does that. Nobody does take time to read research that veil. And therefore, even the research officers are now free. They don't put research officers under pressure. So in the end, therefore, you find MPs sitting on, panicking, for example, on this chair, wondering that maybe the speaker will say, Honorable Awich, Honorable Awich. So there was a joke somewhere about a member of parliament who was a minister, and he was always not prepared, that he was big and he was sitting near Moses Ali. And when he was sitting near Moses Ali, he had wanted to say something. The speaker, Kadaga, did not pick him. He wanted to reserve him to say at the last moment. So when finally it came to him, he was picked to talk. It was Moses Ali who wanted to talk. So Kadaga confused him with Moses Ali. Then he said, Honorable X, you say something. Instead, he begged, he said, Madam Speaker, what have I done? what have I done to you really to deserve this punishment?
That's an opportunity.
He said, please, I've done nothing wrong with you.
That's
Why
a
take
national
on
crisis.
me? This says about lack of preparedness.
Yes.
We have all the research officers, and you are supposed, the MPs are supposed to read the text, internalize the text, and even make appropriate intervention. But we don't, because you are running about things. On the contrary, what happens now is, contrary to the rules of parliament, the rule says you are not supposed to bring Rugamo from the newspaper to the house. But many times you find honorable members quoting from the paper to the house. It's supposed to be the paper picking from the house to the paper.
And to the masses, yes.
It is the journalists who are supposed to write what happens in parliament in the newspaper. But because of lack of preparation and with social media, so honorable members quote what is in the media to the house. It is prohibited by rule, by the rule of procedures. Therefore, the running around for resources impact strongly on the quality. And therefore, many a time, courts have tried to interpret statutes, and court failed to interpret, because the role of court is to interpret statutes. I can assure you there are times when judges have got confused with a particular provision because it is poorly drafted. That poor drafting would not pass on the floor of parliament if we had vigilant members of parliament who pay extreme attention. But because you are running looking for survival and this, how will you get time to read what your research officers provided? Some people read text for the first time in the house. It is known that the pigeonhole of some MPs are so full. Why? Because it even takes time
to check
the pigeonhole and pick out this literature, sit down and read them, or pick down the literature from the pigeonhole to give to the personal assistants or the research officers to say, hey, here is this document, I want a summary on it. Or here is this document, read it and brief me. The pigeonhole are full. So the running has a direct impact on the quality of legislation.
Thank you very much. Let's take a break, and then when we return, we'll still continue with this conversation about the deepening controversy surrounding the regional sittings by members of parliament that's currently underway. This is the Citizens Chat Show. We'll be back shortly.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break, and thank you for choosing Civic Space TV. You're still watching the Citizens Chat Show, and we're discussing the deepening controversy surrounding the regional parliamentary sittings. Before we went into the break, we were exhausting a number of issues, the issue of resources and prioritization. We also talked about the financial constraints that most of our legislators find themselves under, and basically how this impacts legislation. But now, gentlemen, let's discuss the president's appearance in Gulu at Kaunda Grounds as we talk, where Parliament is sitting for the second day. We are having this uproar from citizens about the wastefulness of our Parliament and why these resources, if Parliament really had the spirit to work for the people and to be as responsive as they want us to believe, they would have moved this money to other critical areas. So when we see the president gracing such an occasion, because of what you said, he's on the there's an item on the order paper to recognize or commend him for pacifying the North. But when he's making an appearance at such for such an event, what message is he actually sending the country? That is this okay for Parliament to actually be wasteful, even when the priorities of citizens are crying to have certain priorities attended to? Would you like to start?
Okay, thank you. Now, first of all, under the law, the applicable law, which would mean the rule of procedure of Parliament, there are instances where the president graces Parliament. I don't remember the exact provision, but I know one of them is reading of the budget. Another one is State of the Nation. And I think another at the invitation of the Speaker. So it seems the law, which is provided for in the rules, gives the Speaker a discretion to invite. Therefore, the going of the President to Gulu is not by his volition or force, it is by his acceptance of the invitation. Now, about his gracing or his acceptance of the invitation, the signal it sends, it is interpretative and circumstantial. What I know of my chairman is that how he has managed to put the country in one piece is that he has minimum agreement. He may not agree to a situation, but he may choose not to contradict at that time. For example, he has made it clear that the Parliament Commission at one time raised a lot of money for parliamentarians and through the commission, but he didn't agree with it because he said, if you raise for members of parliament to this much, what are you going to do to the other civil servants? Won't it promote corruption? But he said he didn't agree with parliament, but he chose to let it pass. Therefore, knowing him what he is, accepting invitation may not by itself say the regional sitting is good. But the reading by other people, definitely the conclusion is that he okays it, he blesses it, and he sees it good. That is the prima facie reading of his acceptance of the invitation. And of course, it brings in the element of the preference to budget, that we should have done this, and then the material interest of other organizers. Somebody would even say, isn't he being used? Because he doesn't seem to know the underhands who benefit from this. And he graces it, not knowing that there are people who are benefiting. Therefore, the interpretation of his acceptance of this invitation, which is provided for under the rule of procedures, that a president can address parliament on state of the nation. The constitution grants that he has to address parliament on the state of the nation. The constitution says every session, there's a session opening, the speaker invites him, and then also, what have I said again? Another one, but also at the discretion of the speaker to invite. Therefore, anybody can interpret that his acceptance of the invitation gives a green light to the regional sitting. But I must repeat and say that knowing my chairman as he is, he chooses to let things pass, but he maintains there are things like matters of security and grave matters of national economy that he would not bend down to. But many things he would let pass, especially when he sees that the legislature is independent and he doesn't want to be seen to be interfering. Even when in principle he doesn't agree with it, he will let pass.
Thank you. Joseph, do you find it convincing enough that the president may not or is not actually aware that there are people who actually benefit from certain activities that are actually meant to be vehicles of people making money and so on? Do you think he's actually very, like an innocent bystander?
No, to be fair, Comrade Awich is being speculative. He did not say that expressively, but he suggests that those are one of the possibilities. But that said, actually, I must hold Mr. Museveni completely responsible for his trip to Gulu. As he boasted in Kenya in that event in which he embarrassed the state of the Republic of Uganda by taunting my young brother, Babu Owino, in the presence of other heads of state in the manner in which all diplomatic etiquette would suggest that it was wrong, erroneous, that he raises a matter, that the manner in which he did something that needed to have been done through diplomatic protocol, and he didn't. It shows actually how arrogant Mr. Museveni is and how careless and carefree he is, to the extent, therefore, that if he so chose to not go to Gulu, there would be nothing to stop him from going. However, I also know that the season is here. I must say that thinking about Mr. Museveni's trip to Gulu, and then I think of the reports by his Tanzanian counterpart, that fantastic lady who reportedly decided that they want to cancel, if true, cancel the celebrations for independence to save 445, about 450.
That was in 2022.
You know,
it was in the
yeah,
past,
that's
but
correct.
still,
That's correct.
it's
But we'll just give it as an
positive gesture,
example.
yeah.
And to do so, to save money and to make sure that those monies go to essential public services. Once in a while, I think about that, and that's one of the reasons why I've committed myself that the event that I have 100% opportunity to guide Uganda People's Congress, that I would nurture not only fantastic young men and women, but that I hope that in the future, possibly as I retire to Nagongera, that I hail a fantastic lady that would manifest the kind of work that that fantastic lady is doing in TZ. But in any case, I am saying that Mr. Museveni knows very well what's happening. As president, if he so chose not to go, he would not go. And as I said, also, I know that he's got the position, the power to possibly even cancel a State of the Nation address. Lawyers would argue whether or not it is something which is illegal or constitutional, but he possibly could if he is able to make the arguments for it. And he normally tries to make very persuasive arguments. He rarely persuades me. He's never persuaded me successfully on any major issue. But he persuades most Ugandans. In any case, politics is about perception. So if the majority of Ugandans agree with him, I think for him he would be happy. And if the majority of Ugandans feel that the country is being taken in the correct direction, including the wasteful trip to Gulu, so be it. But I suspect that even if actually the trip to Gulu was one which was economically beneficial to their people, even if it were actually practically, politically in a non-partisan way of benefit to the citizens of this country, and even if it were actually necessarily the case that the arguments being made, advanced by the people for regional parliamentary settings were true, the net political beneficiary here, Comrade Awich, would be Mr. Museveni and the NRM anyway. In any case, perceptions, media, and access to people. You know, if you took this assembly perhaps to a part of Chiboga, which may possibly be currently quite hostile to NRA, people interact, people speak their languages from propaganda to facts and evidence. Almost certainly that's why party conferences, particularly where opinion polls are tested in places like America and others, after party conferences, you know, leaders and political parties gain in popularity. So actually, the presence of this assembly in Gulu is a plus for NRA, and they know it. Now, because they have mastered the art of using public resources and the state and the state institutions and organs to market themselves, lest we forget, away from actually the issue of corruption, they know it makes a political sense for them because it is selling them. Most average Acholi people, in any case anyway, they're simply saying that, well, in fact, you'll be surprised, by the way, isn't it, that, look, you know, Parliament is very far there, they've come to listen to us, they're very good, in a very simplistic, non-distilled way. So NRM generally would, at the end of the day, benefit. But because it's election season, election start, the campaign starts next year, Mr. Museveni is enjoying the space. And I believe primarily for that, they chose that do 4 of them over the next 12 months. You know, they're taking themselves closer to the people. See what happens when Anita is launching a hospital. See what Oboth is doing today in Tororo with Museveni's son Muhoozi, about celebrating the fact that he's been appointed Minister for Defense. So can you imagine a cabinet appointment? You know, you do a national celebration on a Friday. I don't know whether he took a day off. I don't know what do ministers do. They ask for a day off, and do they get a pay, a day without a pay or something like that? So it's happening on a Friday on a working day. And in any case, he's taken Muhoozi away from Kampala and is Chief of Defense Forces with that entourage again. I don't know who's paying for Muhoozi's fuel to go and celebrate at Oboth's place in Mulanda. That is how things are happening. So Oboth and Muhoozi are busy enjoying in Mulanda, in Tororo, and that is my home anyway. And Muhoozi's dad is busy enjoying in Gulu, knowing very well that they are actually going to benefit out of this thing politically, one way or another. The only good thing is that in future times when we're able to organize and push issues on how these guys have operated in the last 40 years, whatever tricks they try to do, we shall check them.
Thank you. Major, do you want to have a go at what he's saying?
Not really, because I was the first to speak about that, only that he extended it to the other celebrations. I think I had already pronounced myself on the invitation of the president and honoring it. But about the minister and the CDF, ideally, if a CDF is invited in his capacity as a CDF for any function, if he chooses to honor, it can be catered for under the Ministry of Defense, under the Office of the Army Commander. There's money there. And I think even the celebration for the minister still falls within the armpit of an official activity, because he's appointed by the president and he's doing that. He's not holding a barokole function at his home to say it is non-official. So I think, in my opinion, there's no big ado about it. The CDF is invited as a CDF. It cannot go in that capacity, and it is catered for. And then the minister is appointed by the president. It's his activity, and it is catered for. So,
Well, interesting. So, Joseph, when you were actually when I had posed the question about the president gracing the sitting in Gulu, and you were basically looking at the political benefits that actually he enjoys from these kinds of rotational sittings, you actually preempted. I didn't want to preempt a question I wanted to pose earlier, but now that I am ready to talk about it, let me pose this question for the MPs now. Apart from the money, what political gains and advantages do they make? We know we're heading into an election season, but we also know statistically from past elections that probably 50% or more of them will not come back. So then what is it for them?
I said at the beginning that prior to this exercise, within the last 1 month, the discussion was about the death of Parliament and the death of Parliament, to the extent that even Mr. Museveni washed them dry, that this corrupt lot. So the Parliament was on the spotlight. Members of Parliament were on the spotlight for being nothing else but thieves and consumers of public resources of doing nothing. So an average Acholi from Agago might be able to ride to Kaunda grounds and see these guys boasting in their money. And that in itself is saying these guys are nearer to us than I could go to Karuma. So really, these guys are presenting these things that they're working. They've made the argument that they're listening to the people. They've made the argument that they're going closer to the people and listening to them, and that they're able to see some of these other things with their own eyes. And they could even argue that, well, coming to Gulu gave us an opportunity to see what happened. The road that goes to Omoro that needs tarmacking, and there's a road going to Omoro that needs tarmacking anyway. And so they benefit. And you're talking about politics. But also beyond that, an average member of parliament, in this case from Kole, people in Kole will know that this thing's going around and these guys are coming to us. And even if they don't come to Nagongere, they'll hear that these guys have come to Tororo, perhaps they've sat in Bali. So politically, from that perspective, the conversation is now away from the theft. The conversation is now away from the commissioners. The conversation is now away from the money. Granted, we are discussing the amount of money wasted in these very particular processes, but we're no longer discussing the money that the Impugas and the other commissioners ate. We're no longer discussing, as I said, I keep on repeating, the fact that Mr. Museveni grabbed, with the acquiescence of Parliament, 500 billion Uganda shillings to give to a company called Rocco, which is a dubious foreign company, which is a business. Grabbed 300 billion, that's a lot of money, to give to some dubious foreign investor in attack sugar. And right now, young, beautiful Ugandans, who have finished medicine after 5 years, cannot properly complete the internship because of lack of 18 billion Uganda shillings. And the other day, Mr. Museveni abused them and their funders and financiers and their parents that if you can pay for 5 years, for a child to study medicine, you can pay an extra 1 year for them to complete that. Forgetting that Mr. Museveni did not pay a penny for university education. This young Mr. Othieno here did not pay a penny for university education. We were paid to study. I was paid to study thanks to the foundations of Uganda People's Congress. And Ms. Museveni was paid to study thanks to UPC. And it's actually a shame that Museveni and I can determine that all those people who are going to study after ourselves should not only pay themselves, but they should actually pay, including for internship, which is something which is the role actually of central government. Those are the conversations that we should be having. And these regional sittings has taken it away, and I'm bringing it back mainstream deliberately.
Actually, I mentioned that earlier, and I had also thought we would actually touch on that issue a little more. But now that you've mentioned it, let's measure which first.
About this, in answering the earlier question, I'd chosen, even when you gave me the second chance, not to comment about the congressman's view that holding this would be a mileage for NRM party. I saw it like it was really an expeditious fishing. He was trying to fish in the lake and try to get something. So I left him to fish. But now that it comes, I just like to say, if it is so came, if it is so came, we take it because it would have come. We take it if we have the privilege or the mileage. But I like to say that as a party, we are insisting on our approach to mobilization, the mass line, the mass line.
Whatever.
We want to be sure that immunization of children is done massively. That's why you don't see polio case now. We want to see that the 7 killer diseases as a mass is done. We are committed to UPE, USE, those are mass line. We are committed to PDM, where we get people in the parish. So this other, by the way, mileage, that comes by regional parliament is a by the way, okay? So that is what we are saying. But the benefits, if you wish, for a member of parliament, I had hinted on the breaking down on this 5 billion. And I had said, could it be that if you sit in Kampala, you don't get out of pocket or per diem? If it is so happens, how much would they get? If in the cash-strapped parliament, for example, for the 3 days, somebody walks away with 20 million or 30, that would be a direct benefit for them. And that is why I had said it would be like the other headmaster who says that when I don't have money, I move the window here, I change it, then they bring the other window this way. So it would mean, therefore, that if we don't have money, let's create a sitting in Fort Fortal. In that way, we create a sitting in Fort Fortal, we get per diem, each of us will work with 30 million. That is better than nothing.
And even if it's 5,
so
net.
So that is it. So that would be the immediate benefit to a member of parliament. By far, somebody may argue that I would benefit because I have had a first-hand feeling for the people in a particular area. That since the sitting is in Umbara, I've had a feeling for the people, I've talked to them, I've sat with them. But ideally,
as an MP, that is your job. You are elected by people because
correct.
You are sitting with them and listening to them.
Even ideally, a member of parliament from Karamoja sitting in Umbara, with a tight schedule, I see this MP from the hotel room to the designated place. I also see very little chance of interaction.
That's correct.
If the parliament sits up to 8, for example, as sometimes it does, it sits up to 8. Therefore, you're going to leave the parliament at 8, you're tired, you're going back to your hotel room. I do not see practically how you're going to start mingling with people.
Just as a matter of interest, though, apparently social media reports suggest that a certain pub called Buganda Pub, in Gulu. Have you heard about that?
I don't even want to comment.
No, but that is thriving. No, without prejudice, I'm going to put it very well, by the way. Yes. No, but it's an important one. That there's a pub in Gulu which is doing big business as a result of the presence of legislators, meaning the social side of it. And that is a point that cannot be dismissed. But unfortunately, we know some of these things actually do happen. But then possibly that's how badly important it is that we should hold members of parliament accountable. And for that, actually, back to you guys, the members of the Fourth Estate, the request by Comrade Awich that we should seek to demand for this figure. Sorry.
Well, just what you said was cringe-worthy.
I did want to, I have read about that, but I am the one who was against member of parliament quoting social
a newspaper article.
So I do not think I should be the one to bring it from there.
No, I was being diplomatic because there's evidence, but I don't want to go there.
As a lawyer, we have sources that you can quote and not quote, citable authorities, social media.
I've got eyewitness account, by the way, since you're pushing me there, but there you go.
Manufacture anything. But I was saying that if you are a real participant member of parliament, most likely if you attend the session up to the close at 8, by the time you come out of parliament, you are rushing to your hotel room to refreshen up and look for dinner. You may have very little time to interface. And therefore, an MP from Karamajo who sits in Mbara may not get the chance to interface so much. So anyhow, by far, this is what I thought to answer your question on the benefits it is. If by chance, as a party, we learn on it, fine and good. But I'm saying we have a committed method of mobilization. We are committed to our mass line of approach, and we shall do it. For the MPs, if the figure is broken out and somebody knows how much they earn, maybe that is their benefit. But as I said earlier, we must, after this as a country, do an evaluation. Is this worth it? It has come to pass. It was concluded, they sat in Gulu, and we said, so what? Where those who were arguing against it, the prophet of whatever, correct? Or it is actually true that this regional sitting as the benefit, we must go and do a research and evaluation after this.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Major. So now, Joseph, I know you had already talked about this, but I would like us to still expound and explore this issue some more about the suggestion by the president that if you sponsor a child at the university to study medicine, then you should still continue and bear those expenses and the costs when they are deployed for their medical internship. And there are people who actually think the president is clearly not thinking right. He's out of touch with reality, and this is just not a smart decision at all.
Mr. Museveni is very lucky that Ugandans are very beautiful people. Ugandans are very kind people. Ugandans are very generous people. They're very forgiving, but they're also at the same time a people who are so gentle that they're unlikely to throw stones. Because, as I said, that's major insult onto the people of Uganda. And in any case, actually, for Mr. Museveni, who in 1986, coming from the bushes, was throwing Marxist slogans like, like mini biblical songs, to now be the ones preaching the death of government, the death of public services. And he's, in any case, then seeking to suggest that parents should take their children to school, pay their medical bills, transport them. Very soon they might say, guarantee their security, you shall be paying for security for you. And then after that, complete your education, go for skills training in tertiary institutions, get jobs, create jobs for yourself because you're not going to get paid jobs. And if you're poor, it's your laziness. And make sure that you get, how far will we go? So at what stage then do parents stop? It's obvious common sense that internship is, the direct role of the state at some stage. Skilling in terms of tertiary education. That the fact that you finish a teacher training education, the next phase is the skilling. These guys killed one other institute, and that's the Institute of Public Administration, IPA used to be called. Now people turned it into a so-called Uganda Management Institute. That was deliberately designed by the first Obote government to say that, well, once you graduated, once you completed academic education, and you're now going into public service, you would go to the Institute of Public Administration that would specifically prepare yourselves for the career in the various sectors in public organizations, including private organizations. That is what government do. And so to say that, first of all, when I saw that, I needed to make sure that actually it was factually correct, as Comrade Awich was saying, that it was actually a direct quote from Mr. Museveni, and turns out that it was actually true. It's extremely irresponsible. So in any case, then we are saying that the UPE that these guys normally like to sing about, one of the figures that I hope you guys in the Fourth Estate will do for us is to try and tabulate for us the cost of UPE. In other words, how much government spends per pupil from primary 1 to primary 7, how much government spends per student in senior 1 to senior 4, how much government spends per pupil in various sectors of education to senior 6, how much government spends for people who go into teacher training colleges, nurses and technical training colleges, all the rest of others, including commercial training institutions, and how much government spends per student in a university education. These are something that I hope, if it's not to you, as somebody watching, will interest themselves, and actually they should actually contact me, because it's a conversation that we need to be able to have. These are genuine, serious policy positions. That was actually extremely insensitive. And to consider that health provisions is amongst the biggest challenges facing this country and the biggest burdens facing the globe today. And actually that one of the things that big governments and established governments do is to guarantee, particularly during the electoral cycles, to talk about how many more new doctors, how many new nurses. I don't have the figures. The newly elected Labour government, one of the manifesto commitments was part of them is a pool of how many new doctors will be trained, how many new nurses they will be trained, key public sector professions to be trained, to be pulled in and linked to national budget. And then you come to the banana republic of Comrade Museveni of 40 years, and then you say that, no, we're washing off our hands to something which has been a basic tradition. And in any case, I repeat, 18 billion Uganda shillings. That is less than the amount of money these guys are going to waste in regional circulation. And 18 billion versus 500 billion Uganda shillings being spent on a private company called Rocco Construction by Mr. Museveni. I think it's actually extremely shocking.
Yes. About this medical intern thing, true, that appears like the statement from the president. And I just like to say that about whether or not he's thinking right, I like to assure viewers that at all times, President Museveni thinks right. At all times. I was talking to a senior opposition leader who in the past worked closely with Museveni. And I asked this opposition leader on something President Museveni had said. I said, could it have been by error or by slip of a tongue? With all due respect, this opposition leader told me, said, Awich, I've been close to this man. Museveni never says anything by mistake. He considers his word and double checks before he says something. Let me give you an example. Right in 1981, in the bush, Museveni pulled a stool and put it there and told Haji Kigongo, Mukwaya, Salim Saleh said, you sit there. That stool is going to be a parliament when we take over power. I said, are you crazy? Where are we taking up? Which parliament? It continued to be a National Resistance Council, which Museveni took power, translated it into parliament, and passed laws which are still in the statute books today. So make no mistake that Museveni can think wrong. Now, the other tools of analysis that Museveni likes to use is logic. Logic, Museveni likes to think logically. Even in legislation, he first thinks that if this logic is this, and the logic is correct, then can't we legislate to now put it into a law? He has always questioned the logic of this. So in this particular case, his logic is If, as Major Awich, I have paid a student in Makere to do medicine for 5 years, and I was committed to it, I wanted to see that this student graduates and becomes a lawyer, a doctor. What logic is there, therefore, that after getting the degree, I have lost the money, I have lost the interest, I now don't see any more need at all? So he was thinking logical, and that is the tools of analysis he uses. Even in logic, he invites that kind of logic. Even in legislation, then the law follows. It is now closed. This logical argument is closed into a legislative language. And therefore, his logic is, if you, Major Awich, you picked Okello Richard, you paid this Okello Richard year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. You, Mr. Awich, you wanted this Okello to be a doctor. Honestly, Awich, is it true that after he has got a degree, you now don't have money to pay? Or you have changed your mind? It's just being logical. And the logic will go up to government. Meaning, therefore, the government students who had been sponsored, even government should continue. You had already paid them, continue. So that is the logic. And I don't think in this way is not thinking right. I can assure you, guys, at no time can Museveni not think right. He thinks right all the time.
But do you think this is the right step to take? He may be thinking right, but you, because everyone has an opinion. But what would you think?
You see, the whole thing comes from, there was a debate about appropriation. Who has the prerogative of appropriating money? The executive said, we are the vision holders, we are the ones. Then Parliament had attempted to divert. You remember the controversy? Parliament thought they would also appropriate. So, in the wisdom of the executive, we are arguing about the priorities of executive, whether here or there. For example, the congressman has insisted that the wisdom by the executive to give priorities to Rocco does not hold. The priority should be this. Now, if you take priorities and the wisdom, therefore, compared to the resource envelope, the executive is saying, in our wisdom, this is the priority. And the resource envelope cannot allow any further. What do we do, therefore? We would have wished to have these students do this internship. But if the resource envelope is not enough, why don't we go to the basic of logic? That you are which, now that the resource envelope is not enough, at which you have paid Okello Richard for 5 years, at which have you already lost all the money all of a sudden?
Okay.
Oh, at which have you now seen that it's not good to pay Okello Richard?
So I find the contradiction here. We have a government that postures as one that is trying to promote sciences, right? The STEM, science, technology, and so on. And the medical field is actually is one of the biggest fields of sciences that we know. And we interact with medical workers all the time. When we are sick, it's the medical workers. During COVID, we saw it's always the young medical doctors who are at the front lines. But if on one hand you are encouraging more people to go for science courses, science programs, and then on the other hand you wake up and create a disincentive, don't you see the contradiction there?
I don't see a contradiction. I don't think it's a disincentive. First of all, there's more to promoting science, even if it is only in health education, medicine. There's more government is doing to that than mere paying tuition. For example, the fact that through government policies, programs are created in universities, that is good enough. that you can have medicine per se, you can have dental, you can have, courses there. That in itself, a creation for government to promote science. 2, the availability of the infrastructure for training, the laboratory and all that, it's itself part of it. 3, the lecturers, the teachers who are provided for, which salary are paid by government, is itself. So there's much more to promotion of science than not only paying tuition. The infrastructural framework given and other supportive entities, it's itself there. But still, it zeroes down to 2 things. The resource envelope available and this logic. The logic that Awich can pay Okello for 5 years and all of a sudden Awich loses interest. Or Awich pays Okello for 5 years and for some reason he feels it is his obligation to dump it at the doorstep of government. It's logical or it is illogical that Awich you paid Okello for 5 years. After 5 years, Awich you have now lost interest in paying Okello for 1 more year.
I've always told Ugandans.
So we shall be winding up now. Yeah.
I've always told Ugandans that the Museveni you see today, the Museveni who's always been around. The guy manipulated you guys. The guy pushed propaganda. The guy played his game. He bought off DP, bought off Buganda, bought in certain sections of communities, sold the idea that political parties are bad. Political parties came back. He recreated something called NRM. It was from a movement, political system. He's a lawyer. Sold off his political organization called UPM, which is non-existent. But because he continuously gets away with it, he continues to get away with it. And that is, Museveni's schemes have generally worked for him, and that's part of what Comrade Awich is calling the logic. So in any case, if it's about logic, I don't understand why you cannot, as a logical thinker, suggest that 18 billion to a priority area that involves the livelihoods of our citizens is far much more important to dubious interest of a private profit-driven organization, which is basically foreign. And then you wonder, are you governing for Ugandans? Are you governing to protect the lives and properties of the people of Uganda? Or are you governing on behalf of foreign interests whose job it is to come and sack the Republic of Uganda? So I think that really does not hold water for me. I think the fact that we are having this conversation here today is rather unfortunate. I also want to say, in terms of privatization, priorities that Comrade Awich is saying in education, this is what the UPC did at independence. We recognize that the priorities for the livelihoods of our people were anchored on 3 primary areas. And we broke it down as a fight against the enemy of the peoples of this country. And that was a fight against ignorance, fight against poverty, fight against disease. Ignorance, the broader sense education, poverty in the broader sense economics and everything else that comes around with it. And then disease, naturally because of health. And you target it. Now, as far as education is concerned, which is partly linked to this with the argument which Comrade Awich is making, simply because there is a classroom with the scholastic materials, you can't go to Karamoja and simply say we built for your school, and so there for pick your children for wherever you like and wherever you get the money. If you don't have money from Kato, you can go ahead and wrestle. If you don't have money from Kato, you can go ahead and break a bank in Moroto, like the NR guys broke a Uganda Commercial Bank in Kabale. It doesn't work that way. Governments lead responsible role. Indeed, yes, they use critical thinking and they use logic. The UPC government did this, and Obote told me this, which I've always shared with a few Ugandans, but let me say it again today. When we pushed for universal primary education to have started in 1972, except interrupted by Idi Amin, Obote's view then was, and this, that he recognized that a new independent Africa, a new independent Uganda, most of the parents would be struggling with affordability of education. So for the state, knowing that education is the #1 equalizer, and we've got an idea of a new nation state that we want to build in a vision of global polity and global reality and global public services, as it were, that we wanted Uganda to join the rest of the world as part of the global community, at par in economics, in the social services, public service, education, and everything else. Government then thought that it would invest in education. And that's how we built education institutions that will not count. But you know what? Primary education, we said, it will be subsidized, not free, but subsidized. But we know that parents, through their cotton, coffee, tobacco, and other activities, they can generally afford primary education. Number two, we said that the same would be going to O-level education. And the parents with the children who continue to secondary education, not many used to do anyway, would go and struggle with them, but also subsidized. Now, both O-level and primary education, whereas parents paid for it, from scholastic materials to teachers to quality education to everything else, were not only provided by government, but they were top-notch, you know? But then what it says that Joe, immediately parents hit A-level, government takes over. The idea that government takes over because higher education would be expensive, university education would be expensive, government takes it over. Government takes it over on the rational basis that not only is it expensive, but recognizing that an educated population will be the beneficiary to the new nation that we do. So we inject resources logically into this. That's what we did. You know, so fast backward to where we are today, you create a universal primary education which cannot be afforded by most rural population, you know, you kill its quality, you privatize education, you privatize university education, you limit the number of students that government pays for, and even those ones, in many cases, possibly are cut limited, you even give them names, some of them state house scholarships, hence basically politicizing it. And then in the end, parents who would have struggled, sometimes maybe beneficiaries who would have struggled, maybe uncles and others sold land to educate children 4 or 5 years for medical education, and simply say, we complete the 5 years, government takes over. And you're saying, no, proceed with it. I do not see the logic.
Okay. Yes.
Sure.
I just want to conclude on this topic. I thought I was replying to his, but my conclusion is that the regional parliament is an independent activity of the legislature, and the executive has no say in it, and therefore NRM has no say. But I must conclude by saying, after this session in Gulu, we must do a thorough study to evaluate the impact so that it forms an opinion on whether to go forward with it or not.
Well, thank you very much, Major Awich. And that also brings us to the end of this edition of the Citizens Chat Show here on Civic Space TV. My name is Judith Atim. We've been talking about the controversy surrounding these regional sittings by Parliament. Special thanks once again to my guests, Mr. Joseph Othieno, political commentator and UPC Ideologue, and retired Major Awich Pollar, Director for External Relations of the NRM. And to you, the viewers, thank you very much. We do appreciate you all. We shall be back next week with a different topic, and hopefully my other panelists will be around, Dr. Sarah Birete and Dr. Roberto Jambo. Until then, bye-bye.